I want to help mentors to recognize poor communication behaviors. And the reason I want to do this is that if you can explain these to your couples or help them to explore what their poor communication behaviors are, it can help them to recognize it and to recognize it when it's happening, and then they can make new choices. So I had an earlier post where I talked about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And if you haven't seen that, go take a look at that. But in this post, I want to talk about four shutdowns. And these are behaviors that shut down the communication and are not validating, but rather just a way to be able to shut down the connection to somebody. Advice giving. And I'm really good at this. You know, if someone comes to me with a problem, I immediately jump to advice. But I've had to come to recognize that that is a poor behavior. That is not helpful because it doesn't validate them. But I see this very frequently in couples. You know, when they'll express something, their partner will immediately jump into giving some kind of advice. So it's something like this. You know, it's like if Michelle were to come in and go, you know, I'm so frustrated with the the living room. It's such a mess. And I respond with something like, well, then don't let the kids eat out there. Sounds reasonable. Might even be the right action, but it's not validating her concerns. And it's not listening to her. So it shuts her down, and she doesn't have anywhere to go with that. The second shutdown is interrupting. And interrupting happens when you step in and you take the conversation in a different direction. So it might be something like, well, no, that's not how it happened. Or, well, wait, I think there's more to this. Or you are interrupting and trying to sideline the conversation into something else. Or another form of interrupting is what I call the history tangent. So it's something like, oh yeah, you know, I remember one time when I did that and it went like this. And I've been tempted to do that as well. And I've had to realize that what I'm doing is taking the attention away from the speaker and putting it on myself. And that is not validating the speaker. Rather, it is shutting them down. Dismissing is all about making light of a situation or treating the other person's thoughts or feelings like they're not important. And, you know, I try to do this sometimes. I do this and I always think I'm doing it in their behalf or I'm trying to be nice to them. But in reality, I'm not. I am just shutting them down. So it might be something like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, which sounds very sympathetic, but it's not. I'm telling somebody how to feel instead of validating that they have honest feelings. Or it could be something like, you know, you're making too big of a deal out of this. Again, I'm dismissing. I'm telling them that it's not important and that their thoughts or feelings are not important. So any form of a dismissal is shutting the person down. The last one is reassuring, and my wife will tell you that she's really good at this, and it sounds so positive, and she's come to the conclusion it's because she's not comfortable oftentimes with what the topic is. So, for example, I might come home and say something like, you know, boy, I'm really worried about work, and she'll go, oh, you know, you'll figure it out. You always do. You know, you'll come up with something. And you know, when she's done that to me, it kind of just shuts me down. It's like, oh, yeah, all right. You're right. But it's not really validating, and it's not showing caring and concern for how I'm feeling. We were explaining this to a couple one time, and they said they had gone to their pastor. And they said, you know, we're struggling in our marriage, and we're just not doing very well. And the pastor's response was, well, you're strong Christians. You're going to figure this out. And they didn't feel heard. It was a way of being able to shut them down, and kind of hard to argue with that, but they didn't feel like they were being listened to and taken seriously. So these are four of the common types of shutdowns. But anytime it shuts down the communication and it's not validating and treating the other person's thoughts and feelings as something important is a form of a shutdown. And as mentors, I want to be able to help couples to be able to recognize that when they do this to each other so that they can start to make new choices and perhaps go in a healthier way. So again, let me just tell you what the shutdowns are. There's advice giving, one of my personal favorites, but it shuts down the communication. There's interrupting, or the history interruption, like, you know, hey, I remember when I did that. There is dismissing, where you dismiss someone's thoughts or feelings as unimportant. And there's also reassuring, which is just jumping to something that sounds positive, but really shuts the communication down and isn't treating their thoughts or their feelings as important. So mentors recognize these in the couples and help them to be able to recognize when they're doing them to each other so that they can make healthier choices.